It's been a tough week for leaders in these leagues. Find out who's falling and who's rising on this week's episode of the Injury Report Podcast. Back again, episode number 329 of the Injury Report Podcast. It is only Nick here. It is, as you can probably tell by the title of this episode, Solo Jam number 11. Now, let me address that off the bat. Then we'll talk about some baseball. And then we'll get into the rest of the plan for the rest of the week. So, the reason why it's a solo episode is I'm bad at planning. And that's an issue. So, originally, me and Ryan were going to record on Thursday because it made a lot of sense to do that. We'd avoid the holiday, and I had something on Wednesday, so it kind of worked itself out to where we're not recording too early, we're not recording too late. We still can put together a decent show, and I'd be able to, edit and record pretty leisurely. Problem was, something came up that then occupied my Thursday, and I never told Ryan that. So then we never made a plan to record elsewise. So then that led me to text him in the morning of 4th of July going, hey, can we record today? And him going, kinda had plans. Maybe we could do something, I don't know. So now it is 4th of July night, and I have made the executive decision to say, don't ruin the rest of your day. I'm just going to do it myself because this is my fault. So we are getting a short solo episode here, which also means for everyone that's very curious as to the NOCO Owls and whether or not they are still in fact in the league or not, or if the now Colorado Springs Sky Sox are here, that is going to get saved for later on. As is the news of the Western Association rising Lake Lazarus from the dead. That's all going to get saved for a later date. And we're going to save any other news that occurred for a later date. Because if all goes according to plan, on Tuesday I get my hand back, which means I'll get to record and edit freely with no obstructions, which means we can go back to the original schedule I announced right before I broke my hand. So you will get a bonus episode this week. It will be almost certainly all news and partially mid-report and potentially more in-depth conversation on baseball. So we're addressing all of that in the first 5 minutes of this week's show to let you know that it's just going to be me. And I understand listening to one person isn't always appealing because the voice just starts to go numb after a little while. And I'm telling you this because you're probably very interested to hear our thoughts, especially Ryan's, being that he did the whole deep dive on NOCO, on the Pioneer League, and all that goes into that, especially being that we teased last week that, hey, NOCO could really be in some problems and the Pioneer League's in some bad shape. And then I'm almost immediately after the press release comes out saying, hey, guess what? So that's all going to come. It should be out on Tuesday if all goes according to plan. And if not, it'll be out a little bit later in the week, probably Wednesday or Thursday. So keep an eye on that. There will be a full in-depth episode for you if that's what you want. If you're down just to listen to me talk for probably another 20 or so minutes and discuss how Gary did the funniest thing possible, as well as Quebec struggling and the miners struggling and the Boulders finding out that, hey, we can in fact play baseball and our division is in fact not particularly good at that baseball thing. So if we would like to begin to do so, we could probably win the division or at the very least secure a wild card. They have figured that out, and now they're doing pretty well. So I think that's where we're going to go from here. And we're going to talk a little bit of ball, because that is supposedly what the show is all about. We will open up with those aforementioned New York Boulders, who have had a really good run as of late. They took a pair from Sussex County. Then they got another win tonight against Quebec, who has been on a schneid as of late, and we will continue to talk about that in just a little bit here. Rain out earlier in the week led to a doubleheader on Wednesday, where the Boulders dropped the first one, the Sussex won the next one 4-3, then won a 7-4 game, and then won a 12-9 game. So these wins haven't been overwhelming. Particularly tonight, they jumped up to a big lead on Quebec, and then Quebec battled back, but the Boulders did manage to hold on. They added runs late, got the run support they needed, so that is an encouraging sign. As of late, they've also been, just overall as a team, looked a lot better since we last recorded and last talked to you fine folks. The team is hitting .339. That is an improvement. They're getting some reliable starts. I believe it's Mitch Senger got sent from Long Island back to the Boulders, so that will be a much needed reinforcement as well. We're still going to need to see a little bit more from them. Obviously, it's still too early to call. The starters still need to perform. They haven't gotten too many top line starts. I believe it was Bice that had a good start in there. Overall, as a group, that still needs to be improved upon. Pitching as a whole kind of needs to be improved upon. But if the bats are coming alive, that is what plays in their ballpark, and that is something that can definitely carry them. However, on the ballpark point, as far as New York's concerned, if I recall correctly, I was checking out their schedule not that long ago, because I do want to get up there for a few more times this year. It's been a while since I've been up there. There aren't too many home games left for the Boulders this season, if I'm right. So after this series wraps up against Quebec on the 6th of July, they have 1, 4, 7, 10, 13. They have 19 home games to 27 on the road, including a large Midwest trip that includes Evansville and Schaumburg, and there's not exactly the easiest of opponents. Granted, a lot of these road trips are going to New Jersey, so that's just to Patterson. That's a short one, 45 minutes. Another one to Sussex, that's again another 30, 45 minutes. So those are fairly short road trips, grant you, but the ability to play in that ballpark does get damaged significantly when you're not there. So building to the park only can help you so much, but if in these last 19 at home, you're able to go, say, 12-7, 13-6, that really does help the cause there, especially if you have some weaker opponents like New Jersey in there. And if you can play 500 to above 500 ball against a team like Sussex County, all of a sudden the math changes here. With tonight's win, they get over the 500 mark, which is huge for a team in their position, seeing as they are now sitting 6.5 back of Sussex for the division. I don't want to read too much into it, but 7-3 versus 4-6 in their last bit does show a strong indicator where everybody's heading here in that regard at this point. And with that last series of the year for both of them being a end of August 3-game set at Skylands, that could definitely be something that winds up affecting the division race there and potentially the playoff race as a whole as we switch over to the Atlantic, where you have Tri-City stumbling a little bit. You have Quebec kind of starting to stumble a bit. Admittedly, stumble for them is playing 500 ball at this point. They still have the best record in this league by a considerable margin. They still are at 36 wins in a 96-game season after playing one game under 50 games. So they are doing more than enough. Even if they were to play 500 ball the rest of the way home, another 46 games, that is, you win 23 more, you're still coming in at basically 60 wins, which is still an incredible season, and I have a feeling they're not going to play 500 ball the rest of the way home. I have a feeling they're going to play above 500 ball the rest of the way home there, so I'm not really concerned about them. That being said, dropping games, particularly that series to Brockton, very concerning there. Narrowly avoiding a sweep with, admittedly, a very impressive walk-off grand slam, which I've seen some people a little up in arms over that. Point is, struggling against Brockton, struggled a little bit against Tri-City, dropped 2 of 3 there, and now off to a poor start against New York here tonight. That does concern me a little bit here. They do have a 3-game homestand after Sunday against Three Rivers. That should be an easy series to sweep. and then a road trip to Ottawa, which isn't the worst road trip in the world if you are a Canadian team, which again should be a series they take at least 2 or 3 from. Then they have a nice little 6-game homestand against Down East and Evansville, which should be before getting back into divisional play again towards the end of the month. We won't look too much further than that. And even then, it's just a really weird end of week road trip to Albany and then back home for what looks like about 9. So they'll be fine there. They'll be set up fine. It is just a little concerning that they have hit a rough patch here. And if they weren't as hot as they were to start the year, we probably wouldn't be talking about this. But being that they were incredibly hot to start the year and up until the start of this week, we're still in the single digits for losses. We're going to mention a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about it. They're still hitting 260 as a team. 370 ERA there. It looks like a couple bad bullpen performances, but nothing really of note there. So we'll keep an eye on Quebec. We'll see what they're up to, but I'm not really particularly concerned about them. Tri-City on the flip side also has hit a little bit of a rough patch too. Dropping a game to New Jersey, not a good look. Dropping 2 to Sussex, gonna hurt you. Dropping 2 to Ottawa here. Then dropping 3 to Down East is a really not good look there. They really haven't had a series win since the Brockton series in the middle of June. So that is something we're going to have to look at. And that was even a split there, 2-2 there. I just noticed that now. Haven't had a series win since the Gateway series where they took 2 or 3 from them. So they really do need to start to pick it up a little bit. They've slipped off significantly. New Jersey is the kind of team where if you plan to play for a title, if you plan to be a contender and you call yourself a contender, you need to take 2 or 3 minimum. You need to take really 3 of 3 there. That's just the situation as it is. So we'll see if they can't recover for the last 2 of these here. But if they continue to lose 2 of 3, 2 of 3, 2 of 3, things can get away really quick, especially with some division games on the horizon. They have Ottawa and then 3-3 and Tri-River home and away. So, and then back home against Three Rivers. So they go up to La Provence, back home, then back up, and then back home again to play Quebec. So they have a bit of a yo-yo schedule coming up here. So this is kind of their stretch here. You have 3, 4, 5 series here that are all very winnable, that you should have a plus 500 record here. It's the kind of thing that if you don't, you're going to get Quebec at the end of the month, and you're going to get New York, and you're going to get Quebec again. And that's how your July ends. And if that's how your July ends and you don't make the most of this opportunity now, you could very well be out of it, and you could be finding yourself in a position where maybe even the wild card's in doubt. Brockton's been hot. We saw it against, obviously now both Tri-City and against the Capitals as well. So they're not that far back. They're not that far off. We have some teams really rising here. That's really all there is to look at in the Atlantic Conference here. There's about 5 teams here that are worth keeping an eye on. Everybody else is either 7 games under or worse. So we'll see how that goes on that front there. Gateway's also looked a lot better. Schaumburg's slumping a good little bit as well. That's something to watch out for. And the final note from the Frontier League before we move on to other leagues of note. Joliet, 7-game skid right now. Not looking good. They really got to turn things around. We were really hyped about them early in the year. They looked like they're making progress, looked like they were going in the right direction. A 7-game slide, it's really cyanide to any sort of hope of making the postseason right now. They're bailed out to a degree by a Wild Thing slide here. But right now they're tied with Mississippi, which good on Mississippi. We have not talked enough about them. They have certainly done very well in that first year. They've had some rough patches, but they've also had some really high moments as well. So good on them. But as a whole, the Midwest seems to be a little bit more in flux. That Central Division, you have a dead heat between Lake Erie and Washington. One would have to assume whoever doesn't win the division is going to get a wild card. And on the flip side, Gateway and Schaumburg right now are really duking it out and should be getting each in there. I mean, they had the best 2 records in their conference, so they should be in there. And Schaumburg would be in first if they had played 2 fewer games. And those 2 games that they did play were not losses. So each with 29 wins, one with 18 losses, one with 20. That's just how it shakes out right now. So, like I said, not totally out of it, but 6 games back. something to watch out for, and a wild card not that much further out of reach. I believe only about 3 games out, so could be some shenanigans happening in the Central there. We will leave it for now, but we'll take a quick detour over to the American Association now, because I do want to take some time to talk about Gary, which I said I wasn't going to do anymore, because it's always negative about them. And sure enough, this team has to prove me wrong there, because they came out and really took it to Kansas City. And we said, both me and Ryan, Gary has an opportunity to do the funniest thing, playing 7 against Kansas City. And originally we had meant it as, well, if Gary goes out and wins 7 straight against Kansas City, it would be hilarious that the team that's supposed to call themselves a contender and has apparently gotten over their speed bump year last year, then comes out and gets smacked by a Gary team that is, really trying to bail water out of a sinking boat. And they'd wound up doing the second funniest thing possible, which is they won the series. And they nearly swept them. Gary won the first game 8-5, narrowly lost the 7-6 game, then came back, won 7-3. Fair loss in a 5-1, but then come back. Game venue switches to Gary now. 5-4 win, 6-zip shutout, only shutout in the series, and then a narrow 6-5 loss here. So for those keeping track at home, Gary has the run diff. So on aggregate, Gary really wins this series even more so. And it's kind of interesting to think that, have we just reallocated some runs here? Gary keeps 1 or 2 off the board, or gets 1 or 2 more. All of a sudden, they win 6 of 1 and do the exact thing we said Kansas City needed to do. Now, tonight wasn't a good night against Sioux City, but again, is what it is. Try to save something from this series, get at least 1, head back home, take 2 or 3 from Fargo. Your season still could be alive due to the current playoff system here, but 7-game stretch against Lake Country, that's not promising, but who knows. That's too far to look ahead for Gary at the moment, but I'm just hoping they can use this as a springboard. Hopefully they found a lineup card that works. Hopefully they are finding a groove and figuring out who is going to be a long-term plan here. I think Peyton Long's definitely in that group, and he looked very strong against Kansas City and has been one of the few Wildcats that over the past year and a half has really stood out as the guy that is excelling. So hopefully they can get something going there. On the flip side, of course, Kansas City is just, it seems like they're throwing everything they had into the dirt here. That was the series we said you're expected to take at least 6. Ideally 7. You got 3. That's the kind of thing that loses you a division at the end. Now, you took out some frustration on Lincoln tonight, but Lincoln kind of fought back there towards the end. You walked into that 7th inning. You gave up only 1 run to that point. You're up 13-1. Then you give up 1 in the 7th, 3 in the 8th, and 4 in the 9th. That's not a positive trend here. That's making things a lot closer than they should have any business being. And I understand things happen here. But in that particular circumstance, it really cannot happen against a team like Lincoln, another team that's really at the bottom of the division, really trying to sort some things out here. You almost waste a really solid outing from Goldsberry. And you really kind of threw away this game when you get down to it. You had as many earned runs on each side. Each team gave up 9 earned. 4 of the runs for Kansas City came off an error. I understand at the end of the day it doesn't matter, but you get 4 runs off errors. That's not really a foundational way of doing things, and I wouldn't be pointing it out if I didn't notice that earlier in the month they had trouble against Lincoln. In fact, they kind of had some trouble against Lincoln all season. You lost the series to them right before the Gary series. And then if you want to go back a little bit further, they were dropping a game to them back in May at the start of the year. Like, overall, you're 500 against this team. This is not a good team. This is not the kind of club that you should be struggling against here. This is the kind of team that you should be beating up on, taking wins here. And it's just a very Jekyll and Hyde team, it feels like, with these Monarchs, in the sense of they're able to handle themselves against, like, the Sioux Cities, and obviously people are going to point out the first series against Lincoln where they swept them, but even still, you're nearly 500 against them. I grant you, I maybe misspoke, but even to that degree, going off of the first series of the year is what you need to get by is not great. So we'll see how it goes for the rest of the way here, but they are getting by against Cleburne. They're getting by against teams like Fargo, which, they're mixed bag there. They're getting past Milwaukee, mixed bag there, admittedly. But they beat up on Sioux Falls. They beat up on Lake Country to a degree. It's hard to really read them. Good teams, they seem to do fine against. The middling teams, they seem to do fairly well against. And as you go further down the standings, they seem to struggle more and more. So I would hope that they can sort that out sooner than later. But, this is a Monarchs team that needs to kind of figure it out and needs to get some pitching on this team as well. I know we talked about it last week a bit, but the pitching staff got to get it together. I mean, over the past week here, when you're playing essentially just Gary and Lincoln, an ERA over 5.5 is not acceptable. Having, 1-5 starts roughly that didn't go your way is, again, not great. It's not encouraging to see a starter that started 2 games with less than 8 innings pitched. That's not really the encouraging sign here. I mean, realistically, for me, what I'm looking at, it just seems like when things go bad, they start to really go bad. And that is not the trend that you want to set if you're a team that is now deeply in a fight for their division. Sioux City is going to try to take care of business against Gary. I have confidence they're going to do that. But, yeah, as far as Kansas City goes, you got some games that all of a sudden mean a lot more now. They're still safely a playoff team, I think, at this stage, halfway through the season. That's going to stay the same. Where they land is really where the question is here. Because this is a team now that, with the way this week's going, and it could very well turn around quickly. I mean, we could be recording this bonus episode on Monday, and my feelings on them could have done a 180. But right now, it does kind of feel like they're on the precipice of deciding, are we going to be the 1 seed or are we going to be the 4 seed in this? And it's going to be interesting to see where it all lands here, because there's only 5.5 games between them and Fargo. And Fargo has not been particularly impressive. That last spot is really anyone's for right now, and how it shakes out there is very interesting, but seeing both Sioux pass them would not be shocking here. Flipping back to the East, Cleburne, again, is floundering. This is the division that at one point looked very promising, looked to be very strong, has now completely filled with mediocrity. Chicago doesn't know what they want to be. We praised them a couple weeks back, and then they fell back to earth, and now they're trying to get back to 500 ball, and they look somewhat decent, but they're 4 games over, so good enough for them. And then you have Lake Country, that's 10 games over, 8-2 in the last 10, beaten up on Chicago, beaten up on Cleburne, doing what they generally have to do. They'll have the occasional off day. We saw that on Thursday, 12-1 stinker. But, when you go down to Cleburne, you take, 5 or 6? That's good. You take 2 or 3 from Chicago. That's what you're supposed to do. You take 2 or 3 from Milwaukee. They struggled against Lincoln too, so what is it with Lincoln and good teams here? But they beat up on Sioux City. They beat up on Fargo. They're beating up on the teams you expect them to beat up on. They're doing their job. And that almost just propels them higher in my eyes, because they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they're handling good teams here. It really is starting to feel like the Doghounds are the team that we haven't talked about at all, but is going to wind up being the team to beat in the long run here. It's just very curious to see here. And, I'm just so very interested at how this all shakes itself out. And in the end, I come back to the one thing with the American Association, which is, while I have issues with how many teams make the postseason, I think all before making is kind of dumb. And while the pick your opponent thing has potential, and I do like trying different things, so I hate crucifying teams or leagues rather, for doing things that are different and out there. But I don't think it necessarily works as good when you can only have 3 teams to pick from, and realistically, only the top team gets to pick their own division, or their own opponent. I think it makes it a lot more interesting if we just kept the divisions for scheduling purposes, and then we allowed you to pick from any playoff team. I think that would make this all a lot more interesting if we just took the top 8. It doesn't fundamentally change anything, but it does allow us to get some better teams in there. Because right now we have teams that are 3 games under 500 and further than that under 500 that are going to be making the postseason. And instead we could limit those sub 500 teams to just 1 or 2 as opposed to having 2, 3 even. So it's just a change I'd like to see, or at least considered going forward. But yes, any event, we'll look at the Atlantic League real quick, and then we will try to squeeze a short Pioneer League discussion in. I won't have much to say on these 2 leagues, as everyone that listens at this point knows. I don't pay for Flow Sports because $30 a month is ridiculous, so we shall not be paying for that. But we will mention some of them rather quickly here because there are some highlights to mention here. It won't be too in-depth here, but York and High Point both have formally won the first half. Good for them. They're getting by pretty solidly. Gastonia is starting to get hot too. That is a very encouraging sign. They're doing it against some better opponents too. Like they're taking care of High Point right now. Now, granted, if you're High Point, you have nothing really to play for, then there's no real sense in, going out and trying overly hard to win these games here when you already know you have your first half locked up. And you could instead focus on the second half, focus on securing home field advantage, and from there you move. But as for Gastonia, they are starting to claw back some of the hole they dug themselves in here. They're roughly 7 under 500 at this point. The first half ends at the conclusion of these series, if I'm not mistaken. And this is huge for them solely for wildcard purposes, right? There's going to be a lot of teams ahead of them for the wildcard. If you can start to claw back and even get to, 28, 29 wins, you can do yourself a lot of favors for that wildcard. You can do yourself a lot of favors going forward for that. At the very least, having this kind of momentum into the second half could be what gets you into the postseason via winning this division. Now, of course, Southern Maryland's kind of finding themselves. They're going to be a contender in this. Lexington has kind of regressed to the mean. They're playing 500 ball, so not as good as they started the year, not as bad as that stretch after the start of the year is, but they seem to be a 500 club here, and then Charleston is still trying to figure it out as well there. Looking in the north here, Long Island's starting to get it. We'll see how that shakes itself out here. Lancaster obviously building towards the second half, as they always do. We will see how they perform there. And Staten Island and Hagerstown, not really in discussion. Hagerstown going to finish the the first half rather, likely with close to 50 losses and less than 20 wins. So a rough trend for those lads there. Atlantic League, fairly boring at the moment. So without too much in-depth discussion on their half, we'll move forward to the Pioneer League. And quick things of note here. Colorado Springs, formerly known as NOCO, not doing well. No surprise there. Great Falls, not doing well. No surprise there. Everything we discussed last week essentially holds firm on the field for them. And all the teams here, that 500 line really is the line of demarcation as to good or bad teams. Although, of notable streaks, Rocky Mountain dropping 5 straight. Rough Scene really taking you out of the race for the first half here. Perhaps they could do something in the second half. Perhaps they could just put themselves in a position should a wild card open up there. Cream of the crop here absolutely is Oakland and Missoula here. Oakland winners of 9 in a row. Missoula winners of 4 in a row, but both with a 9-1 record in the last 10. Half game separating the two of them. Oakland slightly edging them out by virtue of having 30 wins versus 29. Each only have 10 losses on the year. Each of them looking very, very good, very, very strong. Now, whether or not either one gets ranked this week, I don't quite know. I think they'll definitely be getting votes, certainly as far as the poll goes, but this is shaking out to be a fairly solid top half of this. Idaho Falls, potentially for real. We're going to see if they can't get back to that hot start here, but they're not too far back either. About 4 games out of a playoff spot right now. And, of course, Yuba Sutter, not far off either. 3 back in the division, 2.5 back, 7-3 in the last 10 for them. They look like they could be making a late first half push as well. And also Ogden getting a little hot too. 8 wins in their last 10. So they are starting to claw out of the mid allegations too. So we'll see how it shakes out when the first half ends. But things are getting interesting in the Pioneer on the field as well as off the field. So that is about all I have for you this week. It is going to be shorter than normal because, again, one person talking versus 2 people talking. And because we will have the bonus episode coming out on Tuesday, if all goes according to plan. So you can expect all the news on that one. You can expect maybe a little bit of discussion, and we're going to try to squeeze a mid-report in there. If we do have to chop mid-report, it will be put up as the bonus episode for the following week, and we'll put it up on YouTube before then too for people that really want to get their hands on it. So keep an eye out for all that. Keep an eye out for additional content coming. I will be getting back to that original schedule as well once the hand is operational fully. So appreciate you guys sticking in. Been about 2 years since we've done a solo episode, which is a testament to the folk I've had around here for that long, that they've been sticking to commitments and able to appreciate them and all of their commitment. As you can probably tell, I'm running out of steam here, so we'll just do some plugs real quick and get out of here. So, if you want to follow the show, you can do so on Twitter at IndieBallPod, every other platform, IndieBall Report. We'll be getting back to regularly scheduled programming soon, and yeah, I hope this wasn't too difficult of a listen. And until next time, don't forget to play ball.